Egypt and the classical world cross-cultural encounters in Antiquity. I am Isis. Speech in Lamentation and Burial. Funerary rites in the burial chamber. Of great importance, however, is the postscript to the Lamentations of Papyrus Berlin 3008. This passage explains the context of the performance in more detail, and although as made clear by the designation of all temples of Osiris Chontamanti as the location of the events, the text is at home in temple ritual. It harks back to its original use in funerary rites. But this postscript is highly significant for another reason, namely the location of these rites. Even though there is no lack of evidence for the procession of the dead in ancient Egyptian texts and monuments, the textual sources are surprisingly silent about the events of the actual burial. There are, however, texts, again mortuary liturgies, as well as the book with the title, "The God's Protection is Around Me," whose recitation accompanied the lowering of the coffin into its chamber via the tomb shaft. It can be assumed that in the tombs of the Ramesside period a change in architectural practices made it possible for the closest family members to accompany the deceased to the door of the burial chamber. By means of winding descents underground, so-called sloping passages, the living were able to accompany the deceased to the final resting place. The majority of Egyptian burial chambers, though, could be reached only via narrow vertical shafts, with simple steps carved out of the rock, each of which offered space for only one person to ascend and descend, and were certainly not designed to cater to the elderly. Since in most cases the final rites could not be performed in front of the door of the burial chamber, they had to be carried out above ground, and at a time when only the closest relatives were still gathered. The Lamentations of Papyrus Berlin 3008 provide information about this event, which is also anchored in ritual. Here the interaction given in the myth can be considered in comparison to actual conditions during the burial, since the persons appearing in it play the roles of gods. This unique text, which immediately follows the speech of Isis, describes the ritual. Now after this has been recited, the burial site must be completely sealed off so that it is not seen or heard of by anyone other than the recitation priest and the sempriest. Bring 2 women with beautiful bodies. They are to be made to sit on the floor at the main entrance to the Hall of Appearance. On their arms the names of Isis and Nephthys are to be written. Vessels of faience filled with water shall be placed in their right hands, offering bread from Memphis in their left hands, and their heads shall be inclined. To be performed in the 3rd hour of the day, as well as in the 8th hour of the day. You shall not be tired in reciting this book in the hour of the feast. From this postscript it becomes clear that the Lamentations of Papyrus Berlin 3008 were to be recited during the lowering of the coffin by 2 women who appeared in the mythical roles of Isis and Nephthys. At the end of column 5 of the papyrus manuscript, there is a sketchy drawing showing the 2 women, each holding a loaf of bread in one hand and a vessel in the other. One may assume that these vessels are the blue faience bowls, usually decorated with aquatic motifs, whose meaning in the funerary cult has not yet been fully explored. In addition to the drawing on the papyrus manuscript itself, the unique ritual instruction of Papyrus Berlin 3008 can now be reconciled with a drawing on a New Kingdom ostracon on which the coffin is depicted as a pictogram. This sherd, apparently from Sheikh Abadi el-Kuna, is part of the former Gardner collection and is now in the Manchester Museum, University of Manchester. Though it has been published a number of times, it has never been considered in its original context and associated with recitation texts performed. There can be no doubt that the structure shown on the ostracon is a cross-section of a tomb shaft in which a person is seen descending. Most probably a priest. This person uses steps that have been cut into two opposing shaft walls. Ancient Egyptian depictions of underground tombs of this kind have rarely survived, but a representation on the papyrus of Nebt, from the reign of the 18th dynasty pharaoh Amenhotep III 1391–1353 BC, shows that the Egyptians were quite concerned with the question of what happened in the underground part of the tombs, which was usually sealed off and therefore inaccessible. While the papyrus of Nebt depicts only the supplies for the dead individual's body provided by the ba bird, the ostracon from Manchester throws light on above-ground and underground funerary rites, depicting various stages of the final burial.